I feel confident in saying that my last couple of Halloweens have been pretty uneventful compared to most people's. In 2018, I witnessed a friend being devoured by aquatronic spirits, so called the will o wisps. In 2019, I had bargained with the queen of the underworld to free him and his entire bloodline from her realm in exchange for the soul of his forefather, who had horrendously managed to avoid that very fate. All things considered, 2020 wasn't too looking as it was going to be an exception to this new trend. It was October 31st. It was less than a few hours of sunlight left, and me and my girlfriend Genevieve had stood in front of her backyard wearing cocktail dresses, witch hats, and masquerade masks, mine in red and hers in gold. With my wand firmly in hand, I performed the customary ritual for summoning my spirit familiar. As let grow under scared sky upon the hallowed earth, I invoked our pact and call you hints from the astral plane. Healed my summons and come serve your lady, so it mote it be. I spoke out loud to the wind, to the ether. My familiar quickly materialized before me, his form unusually solid, most likely due to the weakness of the veil on Hallows Eve. Are you throwing out another Halloween party, Samantha? Elam asked, smirked as he noticed our festival outfits. I thought you would have wanted to spend the night as far away from the country as possible. Believe me, we love to spend each weekend at bed and breakfast somewhere, but we got a party to invite that we couldn't pass up, I explained, passing him an embossed cream and gold invitation. To Miss Samantha Summers, you are cordially invited to Mr. Seneca Chamberlain's Blue Moon Party in the Garden on October 31st, 6 p.m., held at the Cemetery Estate, number 1 Pendragon Hill Terrace. Be sure to arrive punctually. This party is a witness to the rise of the rare blue moon on Hallows Eve. As this is a highly exclusive event, you are not permitted to bring any additional guesses. Attempting to do so will result in immediate revocation of your own invitation. RSVP regrets only. We hope to see you then. Separate, no quasir. He quickly read it over, glanced up at the Pendragon Hill in the distance. Pendragon Hill was the northwestern part of town, visible to pretty much everywhere in Mori. Local folklore said that it was scared to be the First Nations people who had lived in the area. Although First Nations man I spoke with once, I insisted it had merely been a strategic outlook point, and that the witches and pengrans amongst the settlers had grown used to black magic before the Chamberlain Manor had been built on top of it. We both got one, hand-delivered by Chamberlain himself, Genevieve said, holding up her own invitation. I've only met Chamberlain once at the charity gala. I had thought that since we were both local LGBTQ business owners, maybe we could stripe up a rapport. But holy fuck, he's an asshole. I mean, he calls us both Miss and Mrs. on the invitation, knowing that'll piss me off, but he'll just have to write me off as a straw feminist if I bring it up. I wouldn't even want to go if it wasn't for, well, the opening a court order, Elam said, glaring down at the triple Ouroboros logo on the invitation. Yeah, and don't interrupt me, she did just a little tongue in the cheek, but at least she was somewhat seriously. I didn't mean to interrupt you, he trailed off. You trailed off, Elam insisted, held up my hand, signaling both of them that it wasn't the time. You recognize the symbol then? I asked. That and Latin motto, yeah. It's sort of the secret society. My father was a member of the Chamberlains, supposed to be the local chapel head, he replied. But I was never invited to join, so that was already I know about it. But if you've been invited to orphanage function, then Chamberlain must be planning on inviting us to join, I said softly. I'm pretty sure he only wants you, babe. I only got an invite because he figures we're a package deal, Genevieve claimed. But I've never been invited to one of these parties before, and neither was my aunt. Strong arming purse bone into freeing over 100 souls from the underworld apparently got you on Chamberlain's hot to watch list. That's not the only reason we were going, though, I explained to Islam. One of those scrolls you left me predicted that tonight, at moonrise, there was going to be a convergence of ley lines right over Pendragon Hill. I still don't know what it means, but I am sure Chamberlain does, so I'm not going to miss it. Elam nodded understandingly, handing me the invitation back. So what do you want me to do? He asked. I'm honestly not sure. I confessed with a shake of my head. We're not allowed to bring any guests, and since this is a cult organization, I'm pretty sure that includes ghosts. Just stay on this plane and stay alert, and only come to Pendragon Hill if you sense I'm in danger. The instant you need me, I'll be there, he swore solemnly. I nodded appreciatingly, giving him a farewell hug, and set off to Pendragon Hill. And so that's how Halloween night, I found myself driving up a spiral trance up at the hilltop at the Victorian mansion, owned by a mysterious Isirinic millionaire, and possibly built on the scared Indian land. If you were the type to yell at people doing stupid cliches in horror movies, you're probably upset with me right now. The eerie crest of the hill was encircled with a 5-foot-tall wall of dark gray stones, toppled with a foot-long black iron spearheads for good measure. The polished titanium gates were fully opened, and we were only stopped by one squat servant in the Antronisesc livery and the expressionless, full-face mask, its eyes shielded by the mirrored lenses. Hello there, ladies, and welcome to the resplendent of Pendragon Manor, the essential home of our magnanimous host, Seneca Chamberlain, he greeted with a bow. Speaking in one of those British accents, he had somewhat ancient vendetta against the letter H. I trust you both. You have your invites with you? I nodded and passed them both our invites through the window. Do you need to see ID? I asked. Not necessarily, ma'am. If these are faked or stolen, then it's your heads, not mine, he chuckled, as he stamped our invites in and handed them back to us. Please park your vehicles in any of the designated areas and enjoy your evening. I nodded as I pulled my Corolla into the opulently sized motor court, parking it between the Mercedes, Benzie, and Bugatti. At least I wouldn't have to worry about not being able to find it. The mansion itself was 3 stories tall with steep roofs, deep red and gold siding, and around the 10 times of Genevieve's spacious Victorian house. I regretted that we weren't going to get a chance to see the inside. I was very curious about what the man like Chamberlain might do with such space, such a private and well-defensible location. We followed the path then marked by a small hand-carved jack-o'-lanterns around the mansion and through a decorative floral arch of the rear of the estate. The lawn then looked around, and hundreds of yards from end to end, well-tended flowers beds and shrubberies flanking the perimeter. A number of circular tables have been carefully placed around the property, each lit with their own jack-o'-lantern in the center of display of autumn leaves and flowers. Orange and black paper lanterns have been strung overhead, and perched on the line nearest to the entrance was a nose-breasted cockatoo. I looked around to see where it had come from, and I'm sure next to the mansion itself was an aviary bigger than my trailer. I could see that it housed many beautiful exotic birds, including no less than 3 peacocks. In the center of the lawn was an illuminated fountain that won from the Great Gatsby to shame. A pair of flamingos waddled into the waters, and its entire perimeter was encircled by more jack-o'-lanterns. By that itself was hardly unusual, but when I paused to take more than a passing glance, I noticed that they were carved, not just with faces, but with sigils, just like the ones Genevieve and I made last Halloween. View afforded from the top of the Pendragon Hill was no less remarkable than the manor or the grounds themselves, whereas the fronts looked as the whole Schomberberry and the back of offered a view of surrounding countryside, which I included. I realized some display may Harrowak Woods. "Hey, check out Jamie and Chrissy over there," Genevieve whispered to me. I hadn't taken much yet of the stock of the other guests. Most of them were in fancy costumes. Some I had not recognized any of them, and the aberrant astral energies caused by the gray lines all the time of year to make it difficult to focus the individual's auroras. I looked where Genevieve had gestured a long young couple with a pitch black hair and baby blue eyes. The man was in a tuxedo, the woman was in a cocktail black dress, and they both wore feather masquerade masks. Both of them smoked cigarettes and drank martinis, and they laughed with another guest in the pair of steampunk goggles and Burnley Howie lab coat. It only took a quick reading of their auroras to see that they were both twins and lovers. For a second I felt a pang of sympathy for the girl, but deeper reading of the auroras quickly dispelled any pity and gave way to dread. Both of them were deeply, dangerously unhinged. I didn't want to imagine what sort of other depravity they have up besides, well, incest, but I knew they were killers. What was even worse was that their auroras were a bit off in a way that I had never encountered before. It was like both their physical and astral bodies were contaminated by something that was neither a plane, something truly eldritch, and embodying the twins with aberrant qualities. "Miss Summers, Miss Fawn, so pleased that you were able to attend," Chamberlain greeted as he stepped in between us and the twins, seemingly eager to keep us apart. He doffed his hat and bowed. I curtsied, but Genevieve only responded by folding her arms across her chest. "A terrible shame, though, that the party of mine attend, and you a subdued one. Normally the events are a good more deal lively than this. Honestly, this must be the quietest party has been on Halloween in 100 years, give or take," I finished for him. He laughed at my brilliant acknowledge of his own immortality. "That sounds about right," he agreed. "Would you care to join us for a drink upon the sun trance? You will have the best view of the moonrise from there, and then we could speak more privately about anything to be of interest of you at any moment." Genevieve straddled up beside me and protectively wrapped her arm around my waist. "We'll have one drink with you. A glass of the most expensive red wine that you have in the Pataline playhouse of yours. And if you hurt us, threaten us, or insult us, we walk," she said defensively. "Is that clear? Miss Fawn, of all the slanderous rumors that you have uttered against me, have you ever once not heard that I was an ungracious host?" he asked with a hint of genuine offense. "Please follow me." He led us across the grounds and wide open steps of the Grantos Sun Terrace. It was enough to accommodate a built-in pool, hot tub, bar, fire pit, and the latter of which we sat down in practically ornate patio furniture. Genevieve and I nearly bolted back up when we noticed the brain bubbling in vat. It had both of to be a mere Halloween decoration. Actually had a very human aurora. "Holy fuck, is that a possessed brain?" Genevieve shouted in shock. The brain reorientated itself towards us, glowering at us in disdain. "Language, young lady. This is a society event." A voice boomed out in a gramophone of the horn that mounted on the dark oak podium vast that sat on. "Oh yes, Miss Summers, Miss Fawn. Allow me to introduce you to my business partner, Mr. Whittaker Crawley," Chamberlain said, with a reluctant gesture of his hand. "Crawley, this is Samantha Summer and the witch who plundered Exorcists." Old Stash handed him over the Perisbone. "Never mind the blonde one, that's just her plus one." "And we're done," Genevieve said, rising from her chair. "No, please wait," I insisted, nervously biting my lip. I leaned forward towards the fire pit, looked at Chamberlain straight in the eye. "I figured you were right about that and knew about it. I haven't exactly been tipped on about my experiences over the last 2 years. Are either of you angry with me over what I did to the Artitaxes?" They both broke out in laughter. at the very suggestion. Oh, heavens, no, Samantha, Chamberlain reassured me. No architectures was, one moment, Garch called these free glasses a bottle of the 77 Episare Chatsu Shiraz Cabernet. Merci, Bersikup, Suku. Now, Samantha, Architaxis was a business partner of mine, but he's been dead for nearly 200 years now. I'll admit that was the last of the crows that passed the curse, or whatever it was on the Horwick cemetery faded. I had given a thought to investigating for it, seeing if anything was in value I had left behind. No sense of letting good grimoires molder after all. But you beat me to it, and fair is fair. That cemetery and everything in it is yours. I don't dispute that, and I don't think it's absolutely hilarious that after 2 centuries of evading divine justice, you dug Architaxis up and literally handed him over to Perispone. He paused as his servant arrived and served our wine. You see, Samantha, like Architaxis, Sirius's, like Crawley here, and yes, like me, you defied Perispone. That takes skill, but it takes knowledge, and most of us like the Shutsapa. It's kind of like that I like to differ you about something I've offered every few men, and openly acknowledge fewer more women, the rank of indicted Adderman in the opinion a court order. I remained silent for a moment, staring down at him with the best poker face I could muster for everyone who's never played poker in their life. Which is, I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. A centuries-old society dedicated to us connecting to supernaturally inclined individuals with one another who said accumulating to preserving the occult feature knowledge, he claimed. It is where these books you have found in your cemetery came from. The architects learned how to hollow the cemetery to begin with, and a lot more besides. I am the head Adderman of the Hoddlewick chapter, and as such as an overseer of the substantial amount of arcane materials that I'm sure you'll love to get a look at. You should be flattered. We're a highly exclusive organization. That's probably not much more than 12,000 of us worldwide. Most of us use their gifts to become wealthy or influential, or to attend our lives to evade the fate of the gods that have orientated us. But if you were content merely honing over your craft, that cemetery of yours, that's perfectly fine as well. Understand that I'm asking neither of you other than to share your knowledge with the fellow Addermen and respect our policies on sharing that information with non-members. In exchange, you will gain access to our older, extensive occult resources. Does that interest you? I took a moment to consider the offer. I didn't doubt what he was saying was true, and that belonging to the open occult order would soon come with significant advantages. But it would also mean being under Chamberlain's authority, which it didn't seem like something I enjoy, especially since I have plenty of reason to doubt his moral character. If he wanted me as a subordinate, it was because he thought I'd be useful to him, or maybe he was even afraid that I might act against him at some point in the future. Well, Mr. Chamberlain, I am flattered, but also I am a witch, and as a witch, I value to independence on every value of interest in joining the stuffy organization of Old Man. I am quite pleased with the progress Genevieve and I have made regarding our occult practices. Confident with our ability to continue and confident, and concerned that any sorts of oversight on or your organization's part may ultimately be an hindrance that was worth. As I am afraid I must politely decline your offer. I said as all as dispassionately as I could, like I was reading out of the textbook. Before reaching for my wine, secretly I was terrified of Chamberlain. I had no idea what he was capable of, or what he would do to me for refusing his offer. Genevieve sensed my unease once again, placed her arm around me in display of protective solitary as she stared at Chamberlain down, almost daring him to try and say something. Chamberlain, though, didn't seem angry or even upset. He was an experienced businessman after all, and likely expected his first offer to be rejected. May I request that you uphold your final decision, After you have witnessed the rituals I have arranged for you rising out of the blue blood moon, he requested, a demonstration of what our order is capable might give you the right to reevaluate your decision. I hate for you to leave tonight with any regrets. I glanced over at the fountain, surrounded by the sigil embolized jack-o'-lanterns, then upwards towards the invisible coalescing light lines, and finally towards the eastern horizon as the red halo of the hunter's moon began to rise. All right, I'll witness one ritual, I concluded, casually sipping my wine. Your fountain over there is the casting circle, I take it? Are you summarizing something? Ah, tut. It's almost time. No sense in ruining the surprise now, he grinned. Crowley, the mensma. The door slid open on Crowley's podium, revealing a stirring silver chalice filled with some dense fog-like black liquid. Try not to spill any of it this time, Seneca, the brain said dryly. Chamberlain rose from his seat and carefully picked up the chalice both in his hands. You look like Trump holding a cup like that, Genevieve snorted, taking advantage of this discipline's status on top of the wine glass. Miss Vaughn, if you had the slightest idea of what considered Masma is capable of, you wouldn't dare to insult a man holding 9 fluid ounces in it, Chamberlain said as he made his way down the steps towards the fountain. Genevieve and I stood up, just to get a better view of what he was up to. But close remained to the trance. Some of the guests began eagerly gathering around the fountain, but others seemed to agree with us and kept their distance. We're not in any danger, are we? I asked Crowley, who had wheeled up beside us. Since I could see his astral body, him being the brain in the jar didn't unnerve me as much as it might someone else. Only if we had wards fail, he replied. I have $20,000 wager that they will, so best be ready to make a quick escape if need be. Genevieve and I exchanged a nervous glance, then gave our full attention to Chamberlain's ritual. He slowly poured a masma into the channel carved into the rim of the fountain, which quickly spread and closed into the entire perimeter. As the moon rose, Chamberlain rose with it, lifting his arms and chanting the quatrain in the strange language over and over again. A few of the other guests, including those horrifying twins, joined him, but apparently most of them were not high-ranking enough to be the privy of such powerful knowledge. As the chanting continued, the water began to bubble and churn. The vapor from the masma waffled upwards and formed a whirlwind around the fountain. Genevieve and I both gasped at the flamingos that had been waddling the fountain, failed to escape in time, their broken bodies falling into the pool below, turning it red. The Chamberlain pulled out a purple rose from inside the jacket, the same one that grew in my cemetery, and released it into the whirlwind. When the blue moon was fully over the horizon, the churning water and swirling wind began to settle as the rose waffled downwards towards it, caught by a tall, lanky man, strange dark fur robe, who was now stood in the fountain. We hadn't seen him appear. He just stood there. When a second ago he hadn't. He had also wasn't standing in the water, but on the surface performing literal miracle just to keep it from getting the hem of his robe wet. The skin on his gaunt face wasn't just as pale, but translucent, displaying a network of strained blood vessels that throbbed with exclusively blue blood. He had no eyes, but his forehead had a horizontal triple Ouroboros tattoo, in the space where they overlapped with the reptilian. Vertical pupils, the same black mesmic vapor, had begun to use the summon to drift him into the empty eyes, nostrils and mouth whenever he opened it. His luxuriant, receding black hair was combined with had a long black regal beard. Around his neck, wrists, ankles, and waist was exquisitely crafted in the chains of polished silver, each bound by the orphonic branded seal. It was the sight of these chains that scared me more than anything. As beautiful as they were, I knew that they weren't adornments but restraints for entity of otherwise formidable power. The chained god held the rose up to his nose to take a whiff, savoring the scent like it was the first physical sensation he had experienced in quite some time. Chamberlain opened his mouth to speak, but was silenced by a finger from the summoned specter. "I have one question for you first, Seneca," he said, as a resonant yet raspy voice sounded slightly annoyed. "Did you actually use the goddamn flamingos for the sacrifice?" "They were that I had on my hand," he answered apologetically. "Great Amorous, it's an honor to be in your presence once again. My fellow Addermen and I have summoned you here. Of their rarest blood blue moon, you might—" "Hold that thought," Amorous interrupted, placing the rose in the effect of the left in his pocket in the robe. People had screamed out in shock as the jack-o'-lanterns around the fountain exploded one by one, showering onlookers with orange shrapnel. Nearly all of those who had been keeping their distance, and even a few that had been up close, made a mash dash for the motor court that was in development. When it was the last pumpkins that exploded, Amorous casually stepped out of the submarine circle that had been meant to contain him and then strolled over to the Chamberlain. "Now go on and tell me what that pretty mortal tasks that you were going to perform in exchange for 2 dead flamingos," he requested, his shit-eating grin revealing the teeth of broken volcanic glasses. "Well, I just won 20 grand. I also might die, so on the whole, it's pretty unfortunate the turn of the events," Crowley lamentated. "Crowley, is that you?" Amorous shouted, looking up towards us. "You've lost weight." "Never heard that one before," Crowley muttered sarcastically. "Evie, I know who this is from the access books, but we need to make a discreet exit," I whispered to Genevieve as quietly as I could. She nodded and we headed for the stairs, only to find our route and escape cut off by the Amorous. "Hello there, ladies. I don't believe I had the pleasure." He smiled at us, his tattooed snake eyes seemingly to narrow ever so slightly. "Tell me, what is the pair of lovely witches like yourselves doing hanging out with these mythic frops?" What are you?" Genevieve asked, her face contorting of a mixture of horror and confusion as she tried to make sense with this chaotic aurora. "You're not a moral spirit, or an elderkin, or the avatar of a cosmic identity." "Yes, very perspective of you. I like that." He nodded. "I guess you could say I'm a bit of a Tom Ballady. I don't fit neatly into whatever mythos or theories you have to try to explain that classify things. I'm just sort of here." "Amorous, please, I must insist you not bother my guests," Chamberlain ordered unsteadily, desperately trying to reclaim some sort of control over the situation. Amorous slowly turned around, glaring at him with those empty, fuming eyes, before reaching out his hand towards Crowley. The glass of this vase shattered, and he went flying straight to Emery's open hand. Amorous caught into the brain effortlessly and squeezed him like a stress ball, his spinal cord squirming like a fish's tail. "One more insolent word out of you, and you'll make a very long trek down to Hades to get him back," Amorous threatened. "This is a very rare opportunity for me. Someone adept enough to summon me, but intip enough to mess up the containment wards, and I'm not allowed to let that go to waste." It was then the twins had straddled up beside Chamberlain, looking at Amorous like it was a steak dinner. "Plan B then, Mr. Chamberlain?" the male twins asked hopefully, tossing a decorative miniature pumpkin up and down like a basketball. Chamberlain, his eyes was wide and drained with nearly all color, replied with a nervous nod. The male twin threw the little pumpkin straight at Emery's head with a preternatural force. Hitting him hard, it practically vaporized on impact. If Emery's would have been mortal, blue surely would have been fatal, but it seemed like a little too more than to throw him off balance. It was enough for him, the male twin, to get jump on him, pulling his arms behind his back, causing him to drop Crowley. He spun Emery's around his face of his sister, who had been performing him with the butcher's knife at the lightning speed. "Oh, it's blue! It's actually blue!" she giggled, and I could see that the blood, covering her knife, splattering all over around her, was indeed an inhuman shade of blue. Emery's produced an impossibly loud roar, managed to throw the male twin off of him while pouncing on his sister. The male twin jumped right back on him. He tried to break his neck with the female twin, but bit into Emery's face. It was that Elam appeared beside me, and he just looked as shocked and confused as the bizarre scene in front of him as we were. Elam, cover us while we get out of here. Buy as much time as you can, I instructed. I grabbed Genevieve's hand and pulled her down the stairs. Elam obeyed and remained behind, but I doubt he knew what he would do if Emery's or the twins chased after us. I certainly didn't. The motor court was already half empty, with more guests fuming for their cars when they got there. With only the bare of minimum caution, we needed to avoid crashing into the other drivers. We sped down the winding load ground below. As we drove, the commotion behind us grew louder and louder, the hills shaking with it. The light fumes and plums of astral emanations erupted from the summit like a volcano. I don't know exactly what happened here after we left it, but only that there was free eldritch abominations that no business existing in our world had been trying to kill each other. We were lucky to survive the fight, but never moved beyond Pendragon Hill. I don't know which, if any of them, won, since Elam retreated as soon as Genevieve and I returned to the bottom of the hill. He did say the Chamberlain managed to grab Crawley and get to a safe room, though they were both skeptical on getting any safe room would be at Gwyneth's protection from something like Emery's, or those twins for that matter. I don't blame Elam for leaving. I'm just glad he's safe. It would be nice to know if Emery's is still loose on our world. I don't know what exactly Emery's is, for those opinion occult order crafted into this chains that can only come to our world when summoned, and even then, his power is limited. I hope he went back to wherever he came from, and when the veil straightened at midnight, or when the moon set. But without knowing the specifics of the Chamberlain's ritual, I can't be for sure. If he is still out there, I doubt he'll be idle. The good news is that without a rare blue moon on Halloween, he won't be nearly so powerful, but he'll be hard to appoint. I can only assume that this is the ultimate goal, to free himself in the Order's chains, but I don't know how he would go on about doing that, or how even that's possible. I may be worrying over nothing. He may already be back where he belongs, and I'll just never see him again. Genevieve and I will keep a vigilant eye out for any signs of him during our astral projection sessions, though and so will Elam when he's not answering my summons. With any luck, my next Halloween will be spent at home with Genevieve, handing out candy to trick-or-treaters. But somehow, I doubt it. Happy Halloween, everyone.